Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz guitarist Will Bernard. These days, he is steeped in a host of projects, including his newest 2016 CD, Out and About. He's a very talented cat with a diverse musical palette. His real journey into jazz began while attending Berkley High School, which boasts the country's first bona fide jazz program. His career began to take off in 1989 as a part of the Hieroglyphics Ensemble, who made their recorded debut with the great Don Cherry. Since that time, he has been all over the country and around the world making some quality music. Over the course of our conversation, he discussed his career, his love of jazz, and much more. Please dig this interview, my friends.
So I'm going to go ahead and start off here, and along with your new album, kind of give me a little bit of a snapshot of what's been going on with you. You're Out and About is a new album, but just give me kind of an idea in your words. What's been going on in your world?
I live here in Park Slope, Brooklyn, but I also go back and forth from the Bay Area in California, where I grew up, spent most of my life. So right now and I also spend some time in New Orleans. Those are kind of my three places where I have musicians that I work with. Coming up, I have a little trio out here with Eric Kalb from Deep Banana Blackout and Brian Charette, and I have a group of musicians that I work with out here, including the musicians on that record, on the new record, Allison Miller and John Ellis, Ben Allison, and Brian Charette again. So I do a lot of freelance work, which makes life kind of complicated and hard to explain. But one of the new projects that I'm excited about is outgrowth of an old project. It's called Mad Skillet, and it's John Medeski's new project with Kirk Joseph on sousaphone and Terrence Higgins on drums.
So let me ask you this. Let's go back to the beginnings. You talked about living in Brooklyn now. You come from the Bay Area. What was it about growing up in the Bay Area that gave you this love of music and more specifically jazz?
Well, I went to Berkley High School, which is I don't know if you know about the programs they have there.
No.
But it was in Berkeley schools. It's one of the first public schools to have a jazz program that started in I think 1968 by a guy named Herb Wong. I mean, they used to have jazz in the elementary schools, including one that I went to. That some of the people that were in the jazz group kind of turned my head around, like Peter Alphabaum and this guy Rodney Franklin and a guy named Dave Margan, who ended up being Santana's bass player. They were all in the little elementary school band. Those guys were some of my early influences, and I ended up getting into the jazz band in high school. I still play with many of the people that were in that group, including Peter Alphabaum and Stephen Bernstein. And they moved out here. A lot of people have moved out to New York, from that area.
Yeah.
And then other people that went to Berkeley High were Charlie Hunter and Josh Redman and a bunch of newer, younger guys,
Why did you pick the guitar? Of all the instruments in a school dedicated to jazz, why was it the guitar for you?
Mostly I was interested in rock, at first. I was studying, classical music too, but I wanted to be a rock guy. It took me a while to get into it. It wasn't until high school, really, that I started, I got jazz and really wanted to get into it. So, I was coming from a rock perspective originally. And that's still, part of my world.
Well, when you did get involved with jazz in high school, was there a specific album when you started kind of delving into the layers of jazz that really kind of blew your mind? Well,
I grew up during the earlier fusion era, when it was first happening. And that was what originally, got me inspired. Groups like Mahavishnu Orchestra, Return to Forever, and then one day I discovered Monk's Underground record, which completely changed my whole world. It made me, a different side of straight ahead jazz world that I hadn't seen before. Kind of that. Do you know that record?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great record. Yeah.
I know there's something really different about that record. I mean, it's kind of really tripped out, and very compositional, and great use of space and dissonance, and it was a big album for me. And of course, from there, I listened to all the Monk records, and I could go on and on. But
no,
I just
cool.
I discovered all. I listened to all the guitarists at the time, and really, I think Wes was the guy that really, I still think, is unparalleled.
Yeah.
In the jazz world,
So after Berkeley High, did you go on to any other formal institutions?
I got interested in classical music and composition, so I went to schools in the Bay Area. I went to SF State and UC Berkeley, and basically studying classical music and composition. I kind of left jazz for a while, really. I got more and more into people like Anthony Braxton and Frank Zappa, and groups that were kind of outside the mainstream.
So what did formal education do for you as far as teaching you the world of music and how you approach it, even to this day?
Well, I guess the main thing it gave me was a set of tools like reading and writing and harmony that enabled me to, go and be able to figure out anything I wanted to figure out, if I set my mind to it, And that's how I kind of was approaching it. Then years later, I got more into rock and funk and all this stuff, and then came back to jazz years later, and then realized, a lot about jazz is really listening and ear, stuff you don't work on in classical music school,
Yeah.
So I had to go, always worked on that, but I had to work on that more, especially since I moved to New York. I've been playing a lot more jazz, traditional standards and non-traditional, but, it's somewhat of a different way of approaching music.
So in 1989, you make your record debut with the Hieroglyphics Ensemble with Don Cherry. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I'd been, Ornette and Don were, the Ornette Coleman Quartet was like up there for me with Monk, in terms of some of my favorite music. It was a thrill to be around Don. It was mainly, Peter Applebaum's large ensemble that I was a part of, which was a great group of musicians. That's another thing I should mention is that Peter's new group, Sparkler, were playing Newport Jazz Festival this year.
Right on.
It was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
So, Don was just, it was kind of later in his career, and he's having health problems, and he wasn't playing as great, but he still had, he was an incredible performer and, great visionary in music, and, he was an inspiration for all of us.
Well, you had mentioned that you're playing more straight-ahead jazz now that you're in New York, but it's very clear from your bios that, you're into hip-hop and world music and experimental music. How do all of those create the whole of who you are as a musician?
That's a good question. I keep trying to put my influences together and put it into a little box that can be sold uptown, as Frank Zappa used to say. I think I do use a lot of my influences in in terms of recordings. Every recording I have is not just one thing. I think like this last record, I went a lot of different directions. There's some pieces that are more free form, and some that have more of a funk rhythm, or the one habanero is based off of the Cuban dance form that became a basis for a lot of New Orleans music. So I thought that was kind of an important, interesting lineage of a little dance beat,
Yeah.
Originally from Spain, I guess. I think there's a lot of, on this record I used a lot more harmony, I think, than if we went like three records ago. You know, there's a lot more chord changes and harmonic stuff going on in music, I think, now.
Yeah.
As a result of me studying, playing more jazz standards, and so I feel like, you know, over the years I'm kind of pulling it all together in a way.
Well, and I'm going to kind of go down this path of albums that you made. Your second one with Charlie Hunter in '97, Four Was One, fetched a nomination for a Grammy. So you really hit the ground running pretty well. Had a lot of, I mean, between Don Cherry and Charlie Hunter and getting a Grammy. How was that?
That was kind of a real opener. That was a group called T.J. Kirk, and we actually made 3 records. The second one was the Grammy-nominated one. There was a amazing time in the Bay Area in the mid-'90s when there was just a lot of music. I think it was inspired by the use of jazz and hip hop by groups like Tribe Called Quest. You know, it would sample jazz. So there was groups like groups that were playing those original songs. You know, DJs that were collecting the 45 rare 45s, and groups that were learning, like GJ Greyboy and Greyboy All Stars were kind of basing their whole sound off of these hard to find funk records. So there was an interest in that in the industry and record companies, and Charlie Hunter, you know, was immediate success when he went away from Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy and started his own trio. So everybody wanted to get a piece of Charlie, and at the same time as his trio was going, we started this T.J. Kirk group because we were all kind of hanging out, and that was immediate kind of popular group as well. And so we got got a Warner Brothers deal out of it, which is hard to imagine these days.
Yeah.
The record company world is a far different situation now.
Absolutely. You know, the one thing I've noticed too is that you travel quite a bit with your band and as a solo performer, and collaborating with others. Been all over the United States and Canada. What does travel do for you? How does that affect the way you are as a person, and how does that seep into your music?
Well, I mean, the example I gave before, how I have these kind of, I feel like I'm at home, you know, in the Bay Area and New York and New Orleans. That's a smaller example of kind of how you can broaden your horizons and groups of musicians and social groups that you are part of. Also, just the traveling in general is great for just getting a wider picture of society and the world and music. And I've always been just very interested in all kinds of music and cultures. You know, I've played in Persian wedding bands and klezmer wedding bands and French musette style music, and studied Indian music and gamelan, and so I'm pretty open to a lot of different things that are going on.
So let me ask you this. From a classroom perspective, you've been in a lot of classrooms with a lot of teachers. Have you got any advice that really kind of roils around in your head that comes back and has been really instrumental in your life?
Well, yeah, I've gotten so much. I don't know.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things is, I think, to learn how to practice and how to focus yourself to getting goals achieved, you know, as a musician or composer. I think that's one of the major things that teachers can help you with, you know.
Yeah.
They can just throw a lot of stuff at you, and if, you know, you have to somehow internalize it and learn how to use it. That's the hardest part of teaching. Yeah. And yeah, that's what I try and teach my students. just how to, actually use what I'm teaching them, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very clear by what I've read with your bio and with what you discussed with me. You have a very diverse music palette. So let me ask you this. Who would you consider your music/jazz heroes?
Well, overall, you mean the entire history of jazz, or?
Well, no, just in music, or in jazz and just in music in general. Who has really been a huge influence on you and how you approach music?
In terms of guitar players, there's I mentioned Wes Montgomery, but Bill Frisell and Schofield were big influences for me in one period in my life, because I feel like they really they were coming at it more of a melodic direction than as a chops kind of direction, like songwriter, melodic guitar player direction.
Yeah.
Which appealed to me because I was listening to a lot of before that I was kind of more into songs and listening to a lot of hip hop and stuff like that. So I wasn't really listening to a lot of flashy guitar players, but there was a period before that when I was super into guys like McLaughlin and Holdsworth, and it's all like I go through different changes, I think,
Yeah.
Leo Nocentelli from the Meters, I think I got a lot from him,
Yeah.
In terms of just how to play rhythm, funk and rhythm guitar, and I like the whole spectrum. I mean, there's so many great guitar players now in New York. It's rather intimidating sometimes.
Yeah,
like
sure.
Julian Lodge, I think is brilliant.
Yeah.
There's like 20 guys I could think of.
Sure.
Around here that are just phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me whittle everything down a little bit for you. If you could get nostalgic and go see any show in the history of music, where would you go? Who would you want to see live?
I'd like to see the Duke Ellington Band.
Yeah.
I think it would be one of the top ones. Let's see Wes and Django. Of course, Hendrix would be amazing. Beatles.
Yeah.
Uh,
That's a heavy list. That is a heavy list already.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What is one of the nicest things that either another musician or a fan has ever said to you?
Well, Charlie Hunter once said about one of my records, Directions to My House, he said, "Oh, the record that sounds like you're doing your music exactly." I don't know exactly how he said it, but it was like he meant, I was being really true to my best qualities of my music. I think,
Yeah.
It was a nice. And Bill Milkowski wrote one of my best reviews that I've overused a couple of the sentences where he said I was one of the more potent post-Frisell Schofield guitar players, I think is what he wrote.
Right on. So let me ask you this. Everyone has a version of who you are, your family, your friends, those that are in the crowd that you play to. But tell me, who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? Who the hell do I think I am?
Who the hell do you think you are?
That's a good question. Well, I feel most alive when I'm, I'm feeling that creative spark somehow. I hate to make the comparison, but it's like musicians and artists sometimes are like junkies. Like they get this hit, whenever it is. Something will just make you addicted to being a musician or artist. And I think maybe that happened to me when I first started writing music. But I think that's, a creator. I like to think of myself as a creator.
Right on. I think that right there sums a lot up. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap everything up. Will, thank you for taking some time, opening up about your life and your journey in music. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it, too.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York, Kansas City, California, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Will for his story, his time, and all that music. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store, or visit theneonjazz.blogspot.com for all things Neon Jazz. Until next time, enjoy the music, my friends.
Neon Jazz.